Welcome to the Romanian River channel, and my first impressions of Stellaris Utopia. The first expansion pack proper for Stellaris made by Paradox Entertainment with their in-house development crew. Now this will launch on the 6th of April and will be priced at $20 and I believe 20 euros. At the current time you can't really purchase it off Steam, but you can off Paradox's own store page. Now that said, the game itself has been expanded upon significantly with the Banks update to the game proper, which is being released tomorrow as well, and it comes free of charge. The expansion itself adds and elaborates certain features put in or developed by Banks. For example, with the faction system, you kind of have a lot of issues if you don't have indoctrination, advanced slavery to a degree, and advanced governments also do help. Now, besides that, we do have the Ascension perks, which are the more obvious of the additions to the game, which basically give you 3 different paths to progress your civilization and customize it more to your playstyle. The respective 3 being biological, psionic, and synthetic. Besides those, you'll also have a more or less subcategory to the Ascension perks, because without Ascension perks you don't really have these sub-features, which are megastructures and habitat stations. Habitat stations being kind of a prerequisite for megastructures in and of themselves, because you require the Ascension trait Voidborn to get megastructures, and Voidborn gives you habitat stations. That said, before we get too much lost into it with details and stuff like that, quick show. Now, if you have any games going on currently before Banks, finish them up, because Banks breaks them hard. Besides that, I've at the current time played about 10 hours with a synthetic aligned civilization, ergo I did not really have much to do with slavery. A bit disappointed here, but and advanced governments I really didn't need it because I was a small civilization. I'll show you guys later. First we have to check to see if anything changed with the settings, and short answer is no. I believe Heinlein was the last thing to tweak graphics in a readily accessible manner, in a quite noticeable visual style, which was the bloom quality if I'm not mistaken, and the lens flare. Besides that, not much else changed in terms of graphics. In terms of new game options, one of the less mentioned but very important facts of, well, very important for one who's aesthetically inclined like myself, is the fact that your flag colors now to a degree impact the look of your ships. Granted, there won't be a massive impact, but the main color of the flag does get reflected on the lights and detailing on the ship, so that is a feature which before Banks you would have to apply mods to get something approximating it. This small tweak adds in quite a wee bit of extra feeling to your specific faction, because now on you're not gonna be like, oh, I'm fighting another mammalian race who has ships that look exactly the same, and this is a 30k battle, who the hell's ships are these and what the hell? You know, general clusterfucks. Now it's a wee bit less of a undecipherable clusterfuck, though still quite a clusterfuck. Besides that, we also have a massive rework with the ethics and the government types. The government types have been boiled down more or less, and these will be customized more via the civics type deals, because before this point the government types themselves were more or less boilerplate. You didn't really have much in the way of, how should I put this, differentiation between civilizations with the same government type. especially if they had the same type of ethics. Also, the ethics themselves had two ethics categories renamed into egalitarian and authoritarian, though overall they kind of fulfill most of the same purpose. The main addition, and this addition is linked to the expansion proper, is hive-minded. This pretty much reduces or actually annuls most of the effects of factions on your civilization, which is both good and bad. There are benefits to having a happy faction within your empire, but also there are civil war type issues if they're not really happy. Besides that, and the civics themselves, which allow quite a bit of customization, as I said previously, not much else changed. The civics themselves can be changed during gameplay, either directly or via, if I'm not mistaken, factions and drift in ethics, which can be possible depending on your policies and so on, and the amount of civilizations you absorb either peacefully or non-peacefully into your empire. That said, let's get on to showing what the game looks like in more detail. Now, one thing I will mention, I kinda wee bit cheated because the game itself, well, within 10 hours you kinda see most of what's new. But, for example, with the mega structures and stuff like that, you need mega engineering, which is quite a rare technology to get unless you get specific scientists and you get lucky. And I wanted to check everything for the benefit of you guys, because yeah. That said, let's see now. This being a wee bit earlier in the game, you can generally see what is happening around here. Now, this civilization I actually indoctrinated to a fair degree, though not sufficiently, and then enlightened. The enlightening process made them a protectorate under my care, and later on in the game they evolve into a vassal because they reach the same technological level, more or less. Now, they're very happy because, yeah. Overall, though, they have a slight problem, which manifests even more significantly later on, because the insufficient indoctrination led to quite significant splits between them. I mean, they have a few militarists, which will grow, and authoritarians, which will grow in number, but at the current time, they have an uncomfortable number of enslaved pacifists and xenophiles. Now, at this stage, not much really happens beyond the indoctrination, which was done via the standard observation/research station you can build above primitive planets. Let's see how that evolved later on. Now that was 18, so let's go towards Limbo No More, because the Limbo event now has a, so to say, completion, because once you have droids you get the option to actually rescue those individuals. This was after I turned completely into a synthetic. There's an intermediary stage with the flesh is weak, which gives you cybernetics, which gives you a longer lifetime and some benefits in terms of stats like better armies, better research, so on and so on. The extra life is quite important, really, especially if you're not with the long-lived traits. As you can see here, the evolution has been significant. They are now a vassal, no longer a protectorate, and their planet is still pretty much a ethical clusterfuck. In general, egalitarians and xenophiles having issues. I suspect within the AI's priorities, the enslaved guys are basically the factions who do not want to kowtow to the general ideological bent of the government. For my part, yeah, I have a lot of factions. these guys popped up pretty early on, and they're basically like, be more friendly towards robots and push science forward, especially in terms of comparative, you versus other civilizations. I don't know if this technically takes in fallen empires into account, but if it does, you're kind of fucked, because you'll never be more advanced than a fallen empire until you reach late game, at which point you won't be more advanced, but you will be equally as advanced. Path to victory is the militaristic faction. These guys popped up about, I believe, 5 years ago in terms of in-game time, and they're more towards the profit part. So yeah, basically the factions start splintering up quite a lot, especially with interactions between empires and whatnot. That said, cats in the background arguing with Feld, because those were not even my cats, they were out bloody side. I digress. The interactions with other species, especially when you poke more primitive ones, can spawn factions, and in general factions have to be kept happy. If you keep them sufficiently happy, they give you extra influence, which can be quite useful, especially if you're a small ass like I am. Still quite small. I'm about this big, about I think 5 to 6 systems by the end, but this isn't that critical in normal difficulty, unless you're dealing with a major war between, let's say, yourself and somebody who's either in a federation or has 20 plus systems, because then they can just auto-attrition you to hell and back. But in small terms like this, you can actually compete with habitats, because for example, let me just see, do I have one built at this stage? Yeah, I do. Habitats, which you get via the Voidborn trait in the Ascension perk tree, as I said, basically gives you more living space. You don't get any shipbuilding or ship support features, but you do get a hell of a lot of energy, because the energy collection systems on this thing is plus 10 always, sometimes more depending if the planet you built it around, which in general habitats can be built around most planets depending on their composition, or with, for example, gas giants, how many moons they have around them. If it's a naked gas giant, I believe you can build a habitat around them. If it's not, you can't. If the gas giant itself had plus energy, that will be transferred to a tile around here, and you'll get, if you build the energy collection facility, the plus on top of the 10. The mineral output is not quite stellar, but it is extra mineral output, so yeah. Research facilities are decent, and you do get these leisure districts, which can give you a lot of unity, which makes habitats more or less vital towards the end of the game, because getting traditions is very expensive. I mean, just look at this, and that's not even with most of them unlocked. With most of them unlocked, let's just take a look how crazy it gets. We're gonna cheat a wee bit here. Okay, and let's see, once we unlocked, or well, let's say unlock 2 more, so we see what would be for the last one. Because they do get very expensive very quickly. Okay, that should do. We're gonna adopt this one as well. And once you unlock a tradition tree fully, you get 1 ascension perk. As you can clearly see, with only 7 tradition trees, and that's assuming you can bloody well get there with all full 7, you do not get all ascension perks. You only get 8 minus 1, that being 7. So 7 ascension perks out of 8. and there are quite a lot of them to boot in here, and some of them are mutually exclusive, like for example the flesh is weak, which rules out both engineered evolution, which is the biological tree beginning, and mind over matter, which also requires psionic theory. Now, how should I put this? From my point of view, and hopefully Paradox listens, if you have only the flesh is weak, you could have a halfway point between the two psionic and synthetic trees, and possibly even the biological ones, where you can basically be like, take the flesh is weak and take mind over matter, or take the flesh is weak and engineered evolution. So basically you don't get the maximum level, i.e. for example with the synthetics, complete transcendence into a synthetic body with all the benefits and negatives that brings along, but you do get a half and half, and that would be a very interesting thing to see. It's one of the flaws I found with the expansion itself. It's a wee bit limiting. It does encourage replays in that sort of meaning, but from my point of view, even if you're half machine, you still should have some psionic ability, you know? That said, let's continue on. See how crazy the prices get on the last tree. Okay, that being the last one. So just to unlock it, you need 20k unity. At the current time, I'm getting about 132, and I don't think I get more than 200 by the end. But I am quite a small civilization overall at the current stage, especially. I only have a couple of planets, about 6 or 7, plus about 3 or 4 habitats. The habitats themselves consume quite a lot of energy, and I believe some minerals, so you have to be careful with those, because they're basically more expensive. Can't remember the exact name. Citadels, I think, were the maximum tier of battle station you could build. More expensive version of those, but they do have their benefits, as I said previously. And with the Unity thing, if you're going especially for 7 out of 8, it can be useful to get, because some of the Unity things are quite useful indeed, like as I previously mentioned. For example, getting the Circle of Life, which I will show you guys the intermediate stage in a couple of minutes, or not a couple of minutes, very soon. Requires mega engineering, which is very rare, but getting that and getting this will solve a lot of your issues if you're stuck. Like in this game, for example, I got 50% viable planets overall, not 100%. So if, for example, you're at 100% and you're stuck in, let's say, this area, if you get Ring of Life, you can basically inhabit any system you don't have the ability to terraform, because the Ring of Life will strip down all the planets, wipe them out, and then allow you to build a ring. The first stage being the stage where you disassemble the planet more or less and build a skeleton. Let's just show you guys that bit. We're gonna go with the latest. No, one of the latest saves. Now, directly speaking here, this is where I built my Ring O Life, or my Ring World. Now this is the skeleton stage. The skeleton stage costs about, I believe, 50,000 minerals, if I'm not mistaken. So it's hellishly expensive, and it takes a very long time to build. This is just for the ring section itself. Let's see. A ring section out of 4 costs 20,000 and takes 10 years to build. So it takes 80,000 minerals if you want to build all of them within 10 years. But it is an option to give a pocket empire like myself, who doesn't really have a lot of planets to inhabit, in biological form at least. The synthetic option gives you a way to bypass some of those issues, pardon. But if you're going for psionics or biology, the ring world is a very important option. And the Dyson sphere itself gives you more of a solar power plant, so to say, a quite literal solar power plant actually. I don't believe they're inhabitable, but they are quite useful in terms of getting enough energy for more crazy projects, more crazy expansions. And it does centralize your requirements in terms of defense, because having a Dyson sphere means that system is going to be pretty well defended. I haven't seen any Dyson spheres built by other races, even the Fallen Empires haven't. One sec. Excuse me. But I believe Dyson spheres are conquerable just like ring worlds. So having your Dyson sphere lost could be more than a little bit catastrophic, considering you're also giving the other side a significant advantage in terms of power output. Now, that said, besides the whole ascensions and megastructures and the indoctrination, we also have advanced slavery to talk about, but with this race I really didn't deal with slavery and whatnot. But the basic gist of it is you go to species, you set rights, and you have quite a few options here. Now, of these options, most are available with the bank's update, but slavery and I believe purge to a certain degree are linked to the expansion itself, so are locked out for people who just have the free DLC/patch. And the indoctrination thing is also linked directly to the expansion. This means in practice that factions will be much harder to control, especially when you capture something massive and ethically opposed to yourself, like a ancient empire, who then have a lot of civvies running about that decide, we're not too happy living with synthetics, so let's form our own faction and start fucking things up. Because yeah, they are very, very opposed. And not having indoctrination, purging, and slavery, especially the slavery option to basically depopulate systems by turning them into sentient livestock, basically, can cause a lot of issues when you're dealing with opposing ethics and your own faction doesn't really have the option to exterminate them directly. But for example, with mods like Exterminatus, I believe it was called, you can depopulate the planet completely and just conquer it, so there is the option to bypass that slight hiccup by being a genocidal fuckwit, more or less. For my part, indoctrinate them, and who doesn't indoctrinate? Well, they can always be eaten, especially by the robots, which is kind of odd, but and no, robots don't actually eat. The moment the change from organic to synthetic flipped and finished, food went up to 100% not consumed, which you can then transfer over your farms and whatnot to energy production, because yeah, once you get that, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, pop maintenance, there it is. Though, to be honest, it isn't that big of a hit. And with my pocket empire, I am not having any issues supporting a completely inorganic population. No, not completely, since I can't conquer these guys. Oh, and slight fun fact. Once I conquered these guys, within a year, these guys were like, hey, we estimate your civilization will kill over pretty soon. How about you give us one of your specimens for keeping? And I was like, okay. And then I checked what specimen they kept, and let me just see. Or took, to be precise. I think, yeah, here it is, the preserve. And I discovered they took one of the Fallen Empire's biologics, not one of my proper civies. And these guys took a initial hit to their opinion towards us, because we abandoned our organic origins and they're more like enigmatic observers. They like the species as they are. If you're completely and fully synthetic, they will not request individuals from your race, because yeah, you're basically like, there's nothing to preserve, you're immortal. The only way you keel over is if you get exterminated, quite literally. And yeah, shifts in terms of population via ascension or transference or whatever does have an impact on other factions depending on how they viewed you, what their ethics are, and so on. So yeah, you have to be careful with the ascension perks. That said, I think that's mostly everything to be said about the expansion itself. The free DLC contains most of the features the expansion develops upon, so in and of itself the expansion isn't a requirement to enjoy most of this, but as I said, without indoctrination in advanced slavery, and to a degree advanced government if you want to go hive mind, dealing with factions is going to be an onerous task in the vanilla version of Banks. With mods, you may find the workarounds and so on. But if you want to avoid most of the mod-based shenanigans I had personally to deal with during my recording runs with Stellaris, the expansion is quite a good option to avoid most of that, and the megastructures do give you more tactical options in terms of being a turtle, so to say. With that said, at $20 US, the amount of features included in it compared to, say, for example, Leviathans, which if I'm not mistaken was around 10 to 15, it is worth it if you are a fan of Stellaris. If you are more on the fence and don't actually own Stellaris itself, if you can get it bundled with a with the base game in a sale, could be worth a look. If you're somebody on the sidelines overall and you are coming from games like Crusader Kings 2, well, the game itself is moving more towards the Europa Universalis 4 hybridized with Crusader Kings 4 type deal. So you have elements from both, and this expansion does develop quite a bit of the feature set for the Crusader Kings 2 part. If you don't really need that part or don't really like Crusader Kings 2, the simple Banks update with the free DLC it comes along with and all its features will probably give you enough to play around with, and as I said, the mods could probably help you out with your faction-based issues. In any case, that's my first impressions of Stellaris. Oh, and just for anybody who's new to my channel and has never watched one of my previous first impressions, this first impressions, like all of them, fall under the standard disclaimer, which is that the developer, unless stated otherwise, gave me a review sample of the game for the purposes of doing this video. This in and of itself does not add in any biases personally, because when somebody shows me respect, I want to show respect towards their work as well, and that means fair and as objective as I personally can critique, and that means only my gamer biases, i.e. preferences towards 4X and so on, are at play. Anything else, stripped out. Thank you for watching, and buff the